Army girls can't lead men, my father said, loud enough for the next table to stop mid-bite. The band missed a note. He smiled like it was a good joke. The groom, my brother Logan, did not laugh. He looked past me at the men in matching suits who had once worn matching uniforms. Funny, Logan said, calm and clear. All my groomsmen served under her. A chair scraped. Someone whispered, "No way." My father fumbled his new iPhone 16. It hit the parquet, slid, and lit up on the floor. The room went quiet. Have you ever felt small in a place that should be safe? Share your story below. I will read it. And if you are new here, subscribe, and ring the bell so you do not miss the next stories. Now come back with me to the moment the room held its breath. I am Captain Avery Hart. 2 hours earlier, I stood in a church hallway with a bobby pin between my teeth, coaxing a stray hair into a bun. The mirror gave me a woman in a navy satin dress, shoulders still squared from habit. I do not wear the uniform to weddings. The sight of it pours gasoline on the wrong fires. Tonight, I was just the older sister who flew in from overseas. My mission was simple: keep the peace and protect the day for Logan and Claire. The hallway smelled like lilies and floor polish. A violinist behind a door ran scales that rose and fell like a tide. Volunteers drifted past with programs and centerpieces. At the far end of the corridor, a flower girl tiptoed to see herself in a framed print and giggled when her crown of baby's breath tipped to one side. Mom found me first. Elaine Hart leads with her eyes. She touched my sleeve and told me I looked beautiful. She meant it. She also meant please keep the peace. I told her I would. She squeezed my hand twice and let go. She did not mention Dad. She did not have to. Across the hall, 4 men adjusted their tuxedos in a borrowed mirror. Staff Sergeant Noah Brooks fixed a bow tie that did not need fixing and gave me a nod that meant we are good. Specialist Eli Porter pressed his lips together to hold a joke in place and pretended to study his cufflinks. Corporal Jaden Walsh smoothed an invisible crease the way he always did before inspection. Sergeant Marcus Reed stood by the tall window and watched the rain streak down the glass. He did not look at me. The distance between us felt like a line drawn in chalk. I knew who drew it and why. I also knew chalk can be washed away. Not every mark needs to be scrubbed off the first minute you see it. Logan came down the hall with his jacket folded over one arm and the kind of smile that makes bridesmaids relax. He hugged me hard and quick. His cologne smelled like cedar and new promises. Claire floated after him in satin the color of the night sky. She took my hands and whispered that she was glad I was here. She said Logan told her I am the calm in the room when the room forgets how. I told her that tonight the only job she had was to breathe and say yes. She practiced both and looked surprised that it worked. Dad breezed past the doorway with the confidence of a man who believes the program is only a suggestion. Richard Hart carried a leather folio tucked under his arm along with his phone. He paused to straighten a display of place cards as if the names were employees in need of new assignments. He shifted 2 cards at the head table. He stepped back and admired his work. He did not see me watching. He did not see the way Logan's jaw tightened. Control is a language my father speaks without thinking. Tyler Gray arrived on a draft of cold air and cologne that tried too hard. He works for my father and never forgot to mention it. He leaned against the wall like he had paid for it and smiled the way some men smile when they believe you owe them a show. He asked if I had seen the clip bouncing around the family chat. He said it was loud. He said the yelling did not look good. I told him safety briefings are loud because alive is louder than sorry. He pretended to nod like he understood and checked his reflection in his phone screen. Mom drifted back with a stack of printed programs. She handed one to me, then pulled it back as if she had remembered something. The paper trembled slightly. She almost said a name and then did not. I knew which name. It belonged to a letter she had folded and kept. A letter that should have reached me years ago. We stood in that small silence while the violinist shifted to a hymn that always makes people blink more than usual. The groomsmen filed toward the sanctuary, and I fell in behind them. Noah slowed to match my pace. He told me the ring bearer had declared himself on security detail and had already confiscated 2 jelly beans and a paperclip. Eli leaned back to whisper that Jaden had a personal vendetta against crooked boutonnieres. Jaden shushed him without turning his head. Marcus kept his eyes on the door at the far end. I let the space be what it was. Sometimes a gap is a bridge being built. The ceremony moved like a river that knows its banks. Claire walked, people stood, vows wrapped themselves around 2 people who meant them. Dad dabbed his eyes when he knew people were looking. When he thought they were not, he checked his phone for messages. The phone lit again and again. The group chat loves a wedding almost as much as it loves a rumor. I saw a thumbnail flash and disappear. My own voice barked a command that had been cut clean from its reason. Context matters. Cropped video rarely offers any. After the recessional, the guests spilled toward the reception hall, humming, laughing, retelling the same favorite moments as if they had not all seen them together. The venue staff opened the heavy doors to a ballroom that glowed gold. Crystal caught the light. Silverware lined up like troops at attention. Each place card did its job whether it had been moved or not. Dad drifted through the room like a host auditioning for a better stage. He clapped a friend on the back. He shook a hand too long. He told the florist to pull 2 roses from an arrangement and add them to one at the head table. He did not ask. He announced. The iPhone in his hand pinged again. He glanced down and smiled at whatever the screen gave him. I had learned to read that smile. It said he had found a line he could not resist delivering later. Claire stood just inside the doorway and took it all in. She pressed her lips together and let out a breath that said, "Both, I cannot believe this is real, and I hope it stays real for one night." I told her it would. I promised without saying the word. She nodded and relaxed her grip on the bouquet by a fraction. Logan cut through the crowd and joined the groomsmen by the bandstand. He spoke with Noah in the concise way of men who have shared bad weather and good outcomes. Eli made the drummer laugh without making a sound. Jaden checked his watch even though the only time that mattered was now. Marcus watched the band test a slow song and traced the rim of his glass with one finger. I stepped to him and said hello. He said hello without looking up. I told him I remembered the name of his friend. I said the name clearly. I told him I had written to his mother and that she wrote back. I told him she said her son thought the world of him. Marcus kept tracing the rim of the glass. He swallowed and said thank you in a voice that did not want to be heard. He still did not meet my eyes. I let that be fine for tonight. Sometimes mercy is just the patience to let another person take the time they need. At the far end of the head table, I saw 2 place cards that did not belong where they were. My name had been slid to the edge of the table near the service door. Dad had moved it. He had placed his friend in the seat that had been mine. Control again. I picked up my new card without comment and walked it to a side table where cousins had already started a laughing contest with the butter knives. I took the empty chair and set my clutch down. Eli saw me and started to rise. I shook my head once and he stayed put. He knew what I meant. Not tonight. Not a scene. We pick our ground. The bandleader checked his microphone. The first servers emerged with salads, glasses filled. The chatter rose and softened like the sound of a distant surf. Tyler slid into a chair near me as if invited and began a conversation I had not agreed to have. He asked if leadership was different overseas. He asked if men listen better when you yelled. He asked if I ever wished I had chosen something easier. I told him leadership is the work of telling the truth early and often, and of standing between your people and the worst of the weather. He said that sounded noble. He said noble is good for speeches. He laughed at his own line. Mom appeared at my shoulder as if a bell had been rung and only she could hear it. She asked Tyler if he would mind helping the photographer find a power outlet by the back wall. She smiled in a way that leaves no room for argument. Tyler obeyed. I told Mom thank you. She said she did not do anything. We both knew different. Logan tapped a knife against a glass and people settled into their chairs with the happy obedience of guests who know a toast is coming. The band softened behind him. He lifted his glass and kept it brief because brevity is love when people are hungry. He thanked the families who raised them, the friends who had flown and driven and squeezed in. He thanked Claire for saying yes. He thanked me without saying my name. He said the words older sister and steadiness and always shows up. The groomsmen nodded like they were hearing the inventory of a kit they knew well. The master of ceremonies stepped forward and smiled like a man who had shepherded 100 nights like this one. He announced that dinner would be served and that toasts would follow. Servers moved in a pattern that looked like choreography. Plates landed, bread baskets emptied and refilled. The hum returned at a comfortable pitch. I checked the exits out of habit. I watched my father out of habit. He stood near the bandstand and rehearsed an expression in a reflection he found in a dark window. He adjusted his cuff. He held his phone at chest height and scrolled his messages. His thumb paused over a thumbnail that carried my voice without my reasons. He glanced toward me, then away, then back to his screen. I could see the shape of the night forming in his head. He has always loved the sound of a room reacting to his story. Noah drifted by my chair on the path to the water station and spoke without moving his mouth more than he had to. He said we were here if I needed anything. I told him I needed everyone to eat and smile and keep their jackets on. He grinned and said, "Copy that." Jaden passed him and handed me a napkin like it was a small shield. Eli mouthed a joke and kept walking. Marcus remained at the window. The rain had stopped. The glass still looked like it was crying. The band slid into a soft standard, and for a few minutes the ballroom remembered what it was built for. People ate and laughed and lifted their glasses in little private toasts. Claire's father said something that made her throw her head back and laugh for real. Logan leaned in and kissed her temple. Mom whispered to an aunt, and they smiled in the way women smile when the thing they worried about has not happened yet and might not. The master of ceremonies returned to the center, microphone in hand. He asked for attention. He said it was time. The band let the last note fade. The servers stilled. Chairs creaked into a new arrangement. The room turned its face toward the head table. My father stepped forward. He accepted the microphone with a little bow that said he understood the assignment and would improve it. The iPhone in his other hand lit his cuff with a cold square of light. He did not put it away. He smiled at the room, and the room smiled back because that is how these nights work. He lifted his glass. He tapped the rim with his nail. A clear note rang across crystal and stopped on the edge of silence. I set my hands flat on the table and felt the linen under my palms. I thought about the rule I live by. Do not add heat where heat is already building. Hold your line. Trust the truth to speak when it is ready. I looked at Logan. He looked at me. The groomsman watched the man with the microphone and waited for the first line. The ballroom exhaled as one. My father drew breath to begin. Dad lifted the microphone and the room leaned in. The band softened to a hush. He thanked the venue, the florist, the caterer who saved the sauce at the last minute. He thanked the families who raised good kids. People laughed on cue. He always knows how to make a room feel like his. He turned to me with the same smile and a different tone. He said, families need many kinds of strength. He said I was organized. He said I had always kept papers in order and schedules neat. He said leadership is not the same as keeping things tidy. He let the line drift so the room could finish the insult without him having to own it. A few guests chuckled and then stared down at their plates as if their silverware had become very interesting. His phone buzzed against his cuff and lit his sleeve with a pale square of light. He glanced at the screen and I saw the angle of his mouth change by a fraction. The group chat was busy. Weddings do that to families. So do rumors. Tyler moved along the edge of the head table like he was surfacing from a story he could not wait to tell. He bent toward an uncle and whispered that there was a video. He lifted his phone just enough to show a thumbnail. My face on a range. My voice raised to carry over wind and distance. The sentence cut clean from its reason so it could be held up like proof of something ugly. I heard 3 words that belonged to a safety briefing. Alive is louder than sorry. They were not meant to be tender. They were meant to be remembered. I kept my face still and my hands flat on the linen. People think leadership is the speech you give when everyone is watching. Most of it is the silence you choose when everyone is waiting to see what you will do. Dad said he respected service. He said he had hired veterans and knew the value of grit. He said grit is not the same as presence. He said men follow a certain kind of voice. He let the line float again like a hook for anyone who wanted to bite. I let my attention widen until it found the faces I trusted. Noah stood behind Logan with his shoulders set at parade rest, even in a tuxedo. He did not glare. He did not fidget. He just looked like a man who knew what he would do if asked. Eli had his jokes on a short leash. His eyes were bright, but he kept them steady. Jaden smoothed an invisible crease on his sleeve and drew a breath that found the bottom of his lungs. Marcus watched the band reflected in the dark window. His jaw worked once and then held. I thought of the month that made us a team. The heat that sat on our shoulders like an extra pack. The night we turned a wrong road into a right decision because the map did not match the ground. I heard Noah say, in a voice meant for one person at a time, I have never been safer than when you stand 3 steps ahead of me. I saw Jaden fix a strap on a vest without making a point of it. I saw Eli make a private laugh appear where a panic might have started. None of it belonged in a speech. All of it held men together. Mom stepped between Tyler and the nearest aunt with a smile that leaves no space for argument. She asked if he would help the photographer find an outlet by the back wall. She tilted her head the way only mothers can, and he went because there was no other direction to go. The aunt blinked, as if a draft of cold air had just closed. Dad lifted his glass toward me. He said I had always done fine. He said fine like it was a compliment that had been trimmed until it did not fit anymore. The room chuckled because rooms do that. They follow the person with the microphone until someone shows them how to stop. Logan looked at me. Then he looked at the men behind him. The decision sat in the space between his inhale and his exhale. His eyes were calm. They have always been calm when it matters. The band let a single piano note test the air and let it fade. A server moved 1 step and stopped. A camera blinked and fell quiet. I could hear the tiny click of the phone in my father's hand as his thumb hovered over a message that would turn into a line later. I reached for a glass of water and found only a napkin. Jaden had left it near my elbow earlier, as if he were placing a small shield within reach. I smiled without showing my teeth. I folded the napkin once and set it under my fingertips so I would not drum them on the table. The linen cooled my skin. Dad began a story about Logan in Little League. It landed clean. He knows those beats by heart. Then he folded the narrative back toward me like a magician palming a coin. He said my brother learned to lead in dugouts and on job sites. He said there are places for every kind of talent. He said some talents shine in the field and some in the background. He looked at me long enough for everyone to look too. Then he looked away as if that were kindness. The phones around the room glowed like low stars. A cousin 3 tables over winced and turned her screen face down. Someone had airdropped the clipped video to a cluster of contacts. I watched a few shoulders stiffen the way people stiffen when they believe they have just learned something true and useful about a person. It is hard to teach a room the difference between noise and signal while someone is making them laugh. I thought of the night that sits between me and Marcus. A decision at the edge of a field. Wind that carried sound in flat lines. A friend of his who wanted to push through a gap that looked easy because easy is what it looks like right before it stops being safe. I held the line. I told them to wait for the second team to clear the blind side. I heard the word now in a voice that wanted it to be enough to make it so. I said no. We found the reason for no on the ground later. Marcus lost a friend that week anyway because time is not a ledger that always balances in public. He has been carrying both those truths ever since. That I kept him safe that night. That the world still found a way to take something from him. Both fit in the same chest. Dad made another audience-friendly turn and people laughed in relief. The band leader nodded along like a man who has seen 100 nights sway in the same rhythm. The photographer took 3 quick shots of the head table and stepped back. Mom watched me watch the room. She did not say my name. She did not need to. Tyler drifted back like a wave that has decided the shore deserves another try. He murmured that he could project the clip on a screen if people wanted context. He smiled because he thought that was funny. He did not know what the word context means to people who carry other people home. Mom turned slightly and asked him, in the voice she uses for real favors, to help the florist move a heavy vase near the entrance so it would not be knocked over. He went again because even his pride knows when it is out of place. Dad said he had a daughter who was stubborn in the way smart girls can be. He said it like a compliment and made it taste like something else. He said men have to know a leader will hold past the point where voices shake. He said that kind of edge does not come from paper. He said it with a smile that wanted the room to agree with him. I let the room do what rooms do. You learn in the service that not every fight belongs to the moment it walks into. Noah shifted his stance the width of half a shoe. Eli's mouth tilted with the start of a grin, and then flattened because this was not the minute for comedy. Jaden reached to straighten a knife that had turned 15 degrees off center. Marcus set his glass down and pressed his fingers into the linen as if he needed to feel something solid. He did not look at me. He did not look at my father. He looked at nothing at all for a long breath. I wanted to reach across that space and say the thing I did say 2 hours earlier, which was the name of his friend, and that his mother writes back, and that the letter is folded in her bedside table like a prayer. Words are not always the tool. Sometimes the only thing a leader gives is time and the spine to hold it. Dad's phone buzzed again. He glanced and tucked a new glint into his next line. He told the room about a document I once color-coded in a way that saved a project. He told it like a sweet example of how I keep things tidy. He knew what he was doing. He uses one true thing to point away from 10 others. A few guests clapped because clapping is safer than thinking. The violinist lifted the bow and let it hover. The drummer rolled a soft brush across the snare. The room knows when it is approaching a turn, even if it does not know which direction the turn will go. I felt the hairs on my forearms prick the way they do when a storm chooses a street. My mother stepped to the edge of the head table and rested her palm near my wrist. It was the gentlest act of protection I have ever felt. She stood where a passing remark would have to bounce off her before it reached me. She looked at Logan and lifted her chin by the width of a breath. Logan's jaw relaxed. He placed his glass on the table. He looked at Noah and at Eli and at Jaden. He looked at Marcus last. Then he looked at me. I gave him one nod. It was not permission. It was the reminder that truth has its own weight. Dad turned his face toward the room again and opened his hand like a magician ready for the next trick. He began to say that men follow. He began to say that presence is a thing you cannot teach. He began to say that his daughter is good at many things and that leading men is not one of them. The lights over the dance floor softened by a single shade as the venue tech cued the next part of the program. The master of ceremonies checked his card and took a step forward. The head table breathed in and held. I set the napkin aside and placed my palms flat on the linen. 1 inch, 1 out. My pulse slowed until it matched the quiet thrum of the air handler above us. I watched the glass in front of Marcus tremble once against his fingertips and go still. Noah shifted his shoulders into a familiar square. Eli nodded to himself like a man counting down. Jaden set his knife perfectly straight. Logan lifted his hand in a small gesture that said, I am asking for the floor. He did it without drama. He did it as a man who has watched too many rooms follow the wrong lead. Dad paused for the space of one heartbeat because his son had changed the air. Logan asked for the mic. Logan did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He asked for the microphone with a small lift of his hand, the kind of gesture people obey without checking why. My father paused because even he knew when a room had changed owners. Logan thanked our guests in one clean sentence. He said the men behind him were not chosen for how they looked in tuxedos. He said they had taken orders together when the weather was wrong and the clock was not friendly. He said tonight they would stand for the officer who brought them home. He did not say my name. He did not have to. Noah moved first. He stepped forward by half the length of a shoe. The shift was small. The meaning was not. His heels kissed and stilled. His shoulders found a familiar square. His hand rose to his brow and held. The sound that followed was not loud. It was the soft click of a room learning a new kind of quiet. "Captain Hart, ma'am." Eli was next. His jokes lived somewhere behind his teeth and stayed there. His face settled into focus I had seen after long nights and long miles. He raised his hand. The white triangle of his shirt cuff flashed and stopped. "Captain Hart, ma'am." Jaden drew one breath that reached his boots and let it leave. His palm came to his temple with the same care he uses for small things that decide big outcomes. The pose fit him like work clothes he had been missing all evening. "Captain Hart, ma'am." Marcus waited. He always waits one beat longer than the rest when something matters. He turned away from the dark window that had been his shield. His eyes found mine and did not look away. He brought his hand up and held the line as if it had never broken. When he spoke, his voice belonged to both of us. "Captain." He added the second word after a heartbeat that pulled the room through a narrow door and out the other side. "Ma'am." Chairs did not scrape. Forks did not move. The band forgot to breathe. You could hear the light fizz of a camera charging for a flash and then deciding against it. The world outside the tall windows kept whatever promises it was making to the weather. Inside, everything stood still. My father lifted the microphone and found nothing inside it. The lines he had shaped all afternoon did not fit the space in front of him anymore. He opened his mouth, closed it, and looked down without meaning to. The iPhone in his other hand lit the inside of his cuff with a white square and went dark as if it had been told to be quiet too. Noah dropped his salute only to place one phrase into the air like a marker on a map. "You kept us alive by being early with the truth." Eli followed without looking at Noah or at me. He spoke toward the bandstand, toward the place where music knows when to step aside. "She turns panic into tasks. That is how we got home." Jaden did not waste a word. I have never seen her late to a hard decision. Marcus took one step closer so only I would hear, and then spoke loudly enough that everyone did. "You said wait. You were right. Thank you, ma'am." He let the thank you stand without decoration. The room accepted it because truth requires nothing extra when it is carried by the right voice. My father tried again. He lifted the microphone near his mouth and smiled the way people smile at a mirror they hope will forgive them. The first sound that came out was the start of a sentence that did not know where to go. He cleared his throat. He tapped the mic with a finger that wanted force to sound like control. The speaker hissed and settled back to stillness. He glanced at the phone in his other hand as if an answer might glow on the glass. It did not. I did not stand. I did not bow. I did not speak. I let my shoulders stay where they were, and I let my face be simple. My body knew the posture before the thought reached it. Hold the line. Do not add heat where heat arrives by itself. Trust what has already been earned. Mom stepped into the space behind me and placed her hand on the center of my back. The touch was light enough to be missed by half the room and strong enough to carry me through the other half. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her palm said the thing she had kept carefully folded for years. I am here. Claire lifted her glass toward me. It shook for half a second and then steadied. Her smile reached her eyes and stayed there. She turned slightly so the photographer would miss the moment and capture it anyway. Logan watched the salute finish its work, then looked at my father, and then at me. He set his glass down so the sound would not break the air. Across the room, a cousin reached for a phone and stopped because something in her body told her not to be the first person to move. The aunt who had been fed a rumor stared at her napkin and realized she could not remember which side of the plate the fork belonged on. Tyler stood near the back wall and made himself smaller without knowing why. The florist adjusted a rose that did not need adjusting and took one step away from the head table because some distances belong to the people they belong to. The master of ceremonies took a breath and let it out. He glanced at the bandleader. The bandleader lifted his hands, then lowered them. The sound technician drew a finger along the fader and stopped halfway, as if music would be wrong and silence might be right. Noah lowered his hand and stepped back into line with the ease of a man who knows how to disappear when the moment belongs to someone else. Eli followed. Jaden set his cuff straight by a millimeter and then left it alone. Marcus dropped his hand last. His fingers trembled one time and then held. He looked down at his glass and then back at me. I gave him one nod that meant more than any speech we could have had. My father looked at the microphone as if it had failed him. He tilted it away and back again. The light on its body did not change. He started a sentence with my name and stopped. He put the mic on the head table with too much care for a man who wanted to look careless. The iPhone lit in his palm and he lifted it by habit. His thumb hovered. He locked the screen without reading the message and placed the phone face down beside the glass he had not finished. I heard the smallest sound. The ring bearer in the corner whispered to the flower girl that the mission looked complete. She nodded and held her basket like a medal. Children understand ceremony better than adults sometimes. The applause, when it came, did not arrive like thunder. It arrived like a tide that had been waiting for permission. It started near the back and moved forward. It passed through close friends who stood without looking at each other first. It touched the people who had come to be fed and entertained and found themselves changed by something they did not plan to witness. It reached the head table and settled there without asking for a bow. I did not bow. I turned my head enough to acknowledge the room and then brought my eyes back to the people who mattered. Logan, Claire, my mother, the men who had saluted, the space where my father stood, the place where he was learning what happens when a story stops belonging to the person who thought he owned it. The master of ceremonies found his timing again. He stepped forward and thanked everyone for their attention in a voice that carried respect for whatever had just happened. He said the next toast could wait. He said the kitchen would bring the next course when the room was ready. He did not look at my father when he said it. He did not need to. The band found a gentle chord and let it hang like a lantern. The sound brightened the edges of the crystal without washing out the moment. Servers moved again, careful and soft, as if the plates might make a sound if they were set down with ordinary hands. Noah moved to my shoulder long enough to place a glass of water where the napkin had been. Eli ghosted a grin and then put it away because this was not his minute. Jaden checked the place cards at our end of the table and put mine back where it had belonged in the first place. He did it without showing a flourish. Marcus lifted his glass 1 inch in my direction and set it down again. He could not trust his voice yet. That was fine. Trust takes many shapes. My father sat. He did it the way men sit when they have to learn a new chair. He adjusted his cuff and pretended the mic had been heavier than he expected. He reached for his phone, stopped, and left it face down. He looked out over the room he had planned to own and saw that it did not belong to him. He swallowed and his throat worked harder than it needed to. Mom did not leave her place behind me. She kept her hand where it had been and made a quiet circle with her thumb that probably no one saw. Claire stepped to me and touched her glass to mine. The photographer tried not to take the picture and failed in the best way. Logan leaned toward the master of ceremonies and spoke in the kind of voice men use when they do not want to be dramatic and cannot help changing things anyway. The master of ceremonies nodded and lifted the microphone. "Thank you," he said, to the room and to the silence. "Let us enjoy this meal. We will keep the toast brief later. For now, take a moment." The room obeyed because the room wanted to. I let my breath travel the full path in and the full path out. I let the noise return in careful steps. Forks found plates. Glasses met softly. The band touched the edges of a standard and pulled back. The night resumed without pretending that the last 5 minutes had not changed it. I did not speak. I did not need to. The truth had already found its voice. The room remembered how to breathe. Forks found plates again. The band touched a warm chord and let it float without asking for applause. Conversations rose carefully, like people were afraid to break glass with their voices. Logan did not argue with anyone. He took his phone, opened the family chat, and posted the full training video. He added one line: "Safety brief before live fire. Full context." Screens lit around the room like quiet stars. The clipped rumor that had traveled so fast did not enjoy the daylight. Faces softened. A cousin pressed her lips together and looked down. An uncle cleared his throat and changed the subject on purpose. Tyler drifted toward the head table with a smile he had to assemble as he walked. He began to mention the clip again. Mom stepped between us as if she had just remembered something important. She asked him to help the coordinator move an easel away from the main walkway so guests would not bump it. She said please in the voice that means there is only one good answer. He went because there was nowhere else to stand and look useful. Jaden checked the place cards at our end of the table and returned mine to where it was supposed to be. He did it like a man straightening a line on a map. There was no flourish. He slid my chair out with 2 fingers and let it wait for me. I took the seat without ceremony. Noah placed a glass of water to my right and walked away before I could thank him. Eli made the band leader laugh without making a sound, and then gave me a look that said the joke could wait until tomorrow. Marcus did not come at once. He stood by the tall window where the night had pressed its forehead to the glass. He set his empty glass on the sill and left his hand there. Then he turned and came to me. He did not salute. He did not reach for a handshake. He stopped at a distance that felt honest. He said the name of his friend first. He said it clearly and did not rush it. I said the name back. It felt right to let it fill the space between us before anything else did. You told us to wait, he said. You were right. I was angry at you for a long time. I thought waiting cost him. I hear it different now. I nodded once. I told him I would make the same call again. I told him I still carry the ones we could not bring home. I told him some weights are not meant to be set down. They are meant to keep our hands steady. He exhaled like a door had opened and the room had new air. Thank you, he said, this time without the title. I said you are welcome and meant it as a full sentence. The master of ceremonies returned with a microphone he held like a glass of water. He thanked everyone for their attention and said dinner would continue. He promised the next toast would be brief. He did not look at my father when he said it. He set the mic on the stand and stepped back. Claire crossed to me with the quiet confidence of someone who has chosen her family and will keep choosing it. She lifted her glass just enough. No big speech, she said. I am glad you are my sister. She tapped the rim of my glass with a sound that felt like a small bell. The photographer tried to avoid the moment and failed in the best possible way. Logan leaned down and touched his forehead to mine for half a second. Thank you, he said, for keeping calm when I wanted to be loud. I told him calm only works when someone else is willing to speak. He smiled because he understood that better than most. I felt Mom before I saw her. She stood at my back again and rested her hand where it had been during the salute. The touch was not a shield anymore. It was a presence. 2 relatives approached with questions in their eyes, and both slowed when they reached the space my mother occupied. Tonight we celebrate, she said, kind and clear. The rest can wait. The relatives nodded, realized they were holding their breath, and laughed at themselves. Dad started toward me once and stopped. He adjusted his cuff as if a sentence might be hidden in the stitching. He looked at the phone he had placed face down and left it there. He glanced at the microphone on the stand and glanced away. Some choices require volume. Some require stillness. He seemed to be learning which kind this was. Plates arrived and left. The room found its old rhythm in a new key. People told the safe stories weddings are built to hold. The band let a melody settle like warm light across the floor. The ring bearer announced to the flower girl that the mission was back on schedule. She agreed and inspected the petals like inventory. At the far end of the hall, Tyler reappeared with the easel and an extension cord that did not need his help. He hovered near a cluster of cousins. The cousins watched the full video with the sound low and their expressions changed by degrees. One of them handed the phone back and shook his head at himself. I should have asked first, he said to no one in particular. Tyler tried to laugh and then found the laugh would not arrive on command. He tucked his hands in his pockets and stared at the floral arrangements as if they might explain something. An aunt who had once quoted the rumor passed by our table and stopped. She pressed her fingers to the linen like she needed a steady surface. "I am sorry," she said. "I should have known better. I told her the night belonged to Logan and Claire. I told her grace is also a kind of discipline." She nodded like a student who had just learned a useful rule and moved on. The groomsmen relaxed into their chairs in stages. Noah let his shoulders drop for the first time all night. Eli finally allowed himself one small joke and then tucked it away again. Jaden watched the room and then stopped watching because he trusted it to hold. Marcus stood at the back for a minute and then sat at his place and ate like a man who had found his appetite. I finished a plate I could not name. It tasted like something that wanted to be a bridge. I drank water and felt my pulse settle into a line I recognized. The band slid into a tune that couples like to sway to when they believe no one is watching. People stood. The dance floor formed. Claire caught my eye and smiled with relief that looked a lot like joy. My father stood again, not for the microphone, but to move through the room as a guest among other guests. He shook hands in shorter arcs. He laughed less loudly. He stopped beside our table and looked at me, then at my mother. The words he might have chosen did not come. He gave a short nod that did not ask for anything in return. It was not an apology. It was also not nothing. He continued on and let the room be what it had become without his help. A relative asked if I would take a photo near the head table. I said yes and set one condition: no speeches. The relative laughed and agreed. We stood in a simple line. The flash popped once. The photographer lowered the camera and said we were good. It felt like the right word. I checked the time. The night still had hours if people wanted them. I knew mine would end outside where the air did not carry other people's stories. I planned the path to the door in my head the way I always do. Not to escape, to choose. Logan walked past the bandstand and gave the leader a small signal. The tempo lifted by a breath. The room liked it. Claire spun in a circle that let her dress catch the light. People clapped on the wrong beats and did not care. The florist cried for reasons that belonged to her and then laughed at herself again. Mom leaned down so only I could hear her. "I should have given you that letter years ago," she said. "The one I kept." "I know," I said. Her mouth trembled into a smile. "After dinner?" she said. I nodded. After dinner is a good place to tell the truth that needs a chair. The master of ceremonies returned with the microphone and the gentlest timing in the room. He announced that the next toast would be from Claire's father and that it would be short. People cheered because short sounded like mercy. Claire's father stood and thanked the families, the friends, and the luck that lets two people find each other on purpose. He looked at me when he said, "Thank you to those who teach us how to stand tall without stepping on anyone else." It landed like a handshake given with both hands. I let the applause wash by without catching any of it. I had no speech to give and no desire to start one. The truth had already spoken for itself. My job now was to keep the edges smooth so it could stay standing. Dinner slipped into dessert. Plates of cake arrived with forks that looked too small for the work ahead. People pretended they would only take 2 bites and did not keep the promise. The band moved into something soft enough to talk over without losing the melody. The staff began the 1,000 quiet tasks that return a room to itself. I felt the night change again. Not with a shock, but with a shift. The work inside was done. There was a field outside the doors where the grass would still be cool and the sky would be low. I wanted a minute with the air, and a minute with my mother and the letter she had kept. I wanted to leave while the room was gentle, and the truth was still standing in the center without needing me to guard it. I stood. Claire saw and nodded like she understood the shape of my plan. Logan caught the movement and tilted his head toward the side exit that leads to quiet. Mom touched my arm and kept step. The groomsmen watched us go with faces that said the mission had moved to a new phase and everyone knew their role. The doors to the patio opened on hinges that respected the moment. Cool air met my face and carried away the last of the heat. The music thinned behind us. The night held steady. We were ready to finish what the silence had started. The patio light was the color of honey. The music inside thinned to a soft line, and the night air cooled the last of the heat on my skin. Mom pressed a worn envelope into my hand. The paper was soft at the corners, like it had been carried too long. She looked at the envelope and nodded at me. "This should have reached you years ago," she said. I turned the flap and felt the seal give with a dry sigh. Inside was a commendation with my name, the unit crest, and a signature that once smelled of dust and long days. The citation did not tell a grand story. It told 3 sentences that understood what mattered. You kept your team safe. You made the hard call on time. You brought them home. I read one line aloud, and the night seemed to click into place. The sounds from the ballroom settled behind me. The patio lights hummed like a promise that had finally remembered its words. Mom touched my wrist, and I felt her hand try to become steady against my pulse. "I am sorry," she said. "I kept it because I thought it would calm your father. I thought it would help if I waited for a better day. I was wrong. I was quiet when I should have stood beside you." I put the letter back into its envelope and gave it the careful weight it had been missing. "You're here now," I said. "You stood beside me when it mattered. That is the day that counts." She leaned forward and I met her halfway. It was not a dramatic embrace. It was the kind that older families learn to do when they finally choose the same side of a wall. Footsteps paused at the mouth of the patio, and the shape of my father held in the doorway. He looked at the microphone that was not there, and then at the phone he had left face down on the table. His hands went to his cuffs and stayed there. He took 2 steps into the light and stopped as if the floor might write a sentence for him if he gave it time. "Avery," he said, "and let the name do most of the work. I let it try." The night did not move. "We can talk tomorrow," I said. "Tonight belongs to Logan and Claire." He nodded because there was nothing to argue with inside that sentence. His mouth twitched toward a smile he could not find. He looked at the envelope in my hand and then away like a man who knows what he has cost and is not ready to price it out loud. He cleared his throat. "Safe drive," he said. It was not an apology. It was also not nothing. Some men learn to speak by saying the smallest true thing they can manage and leaving space around it so it will not break. He stepped back into the doorway and let the music take him. The patio kept its shape. The envelope felt less like paper and more like a key. I slid it into my clutch and knew I would read the whole of it later with a pen in my hand and the time to underline what a younger me would have needed to hear. When we returned through the side door, the ballroom did not startle. It accepted us the way water accepts a hand. The band was playing something couples could sway to without watching their feet. The master of ceremonies was speaking with the staff in low tones that respected the night. My chair had been placed where it belonged. The place card carried my name in the steady script of someone who understands that names are not decorations. Logan had pinned the full context video at the top of the family chat with one plain sentence. "Safety brief before live fire. Full clip." The read receipts stacked like little windows opening in the dark. The rumor that had cut itself free from its roots folded up without an announcement. No one posted a clever line. No one tried to rescue a bad take. The silence in a thread can be a kind of education. Tyler drifted near the end of the bar and studied an arrangement of roses like they might tell him where to stand. He laughed once into the space near him and no one turned. The room was not cruel. It simply did not need him. Some nights kindness is the shape of being ignored until you learn a better way to show up. Mom stayed close enough that her sleeve brushed mine when someone walked past too quickly. She did not explain anything to anyone. She did not translate me to relatives who had not earned that privilege. She asked a cousin if the food was to his liking, and he said yes, and looked at me as if he had just remembered where respect lives. The commendation sat against my palm inside the clutch like a steady heart. The weight was right. I picked up my water and felt the glass go from cool to warm and back again. The room had found its balance. I had found mine. Claire reached me with the grace of someone who knows exactly where she is supposed to be. She lifted her glass until it touched mine with a sound like a small bell. "No speeches," she said. "Just us." Her eyes were bright in a way that belongs to people who have just said yes and mean to keep saying it. I told her I was glad to be her sister. She said she had always wanted one who could spot a storm and still set the table. Marcus stood near the tall window again, and this time he came without hesitation. He said the name of his friend first, and I said it back. "I would like to visit his mother," he said. "Come with me." I said yes. He nodded once, and whatever had been tight in his jaw let go. That is the kind of yes that makes a room kinder even when the room does not hear it. Noah placed a plate in front of me that was not from the kitchen. It was a slice of cake rescued from an earlier tray because he had seen me pass on dessert when the staff came by. He set it down like a man returning a piece of equipment to the person who needed it. Eli laughed once at something he did not repeat because the joke could wait. Jaden checked the line of forks at our end of the table and found all of them true. Small order is a language he speaks without words. The master of ceremonies invited Claire's father to say a few words and kept a hand near the mic in case the room needed a gentle stop. The speech was brief and clean. He thanked people for making the long drive. He thanked luck for bringing two people to the same map. He looked at me and said we all stand taller when someone in the room knows how to stand without stepping on anyone else. It landed quietly in the center and did not ask for credit. My father moved like a guest among guests. He shook hands and measured arcs. He laughed less loudly. He did not reach for the microphone. He passed our table and offered me a small nod that did not ask to be returned. The room looked past him and did not follow his path. He was not punished. He was no longer needed to anchor the night. That is its own kind of verdict. A cousin asked for a photo, and I agreed with one condition. No speeches. We stood in a simple line. The photographer lifted the camera and dropped it again. She said we were good, and I believed her. The word felt as exact as a rank pinned where it belongs. Dinner became dessert, and dessert became the gentle chaos that means a celebration has learned how to end without breaking what it built. People said their goodnights in clusters, glasses were collected. The band slid toward a last song. The staff began the small miracles that return a room to its blank face. Logan came to me, and we stood at the edge of the dance floor. He did not talk about what happened because there was nothing to add. He said, "Thank you again," and I told him thank you back because he had done the brave thing at the brave time. He said he picked his groomsmen for more than their tuxedo sizes. I told him I noticed. I checked the time and felt the door call me. The outside air had cooled to a gentle clarity. I wanted the sky and the space and the quiet that comes when a room no longer needs you. I gathered my clutch. Mom joined me with the envelope tucked under her arm like a promise she meant to keep this time. Logan nodded toward the side exit. Claire squeezed my hand. The groomsmen watched us cross the floor with the look men wear when the mission has changed names and they trust the person who will carry it. We stepped onto the patio and the night met us. The air smelled like damp stone and cut grass. A breeze brushed the last of the ballroom from my shoulders. In the parking lot, the cars rested under a low sky that held the reflection of the chandeliers like a map turned upside down. Mom handed me the envelope and I put it in the glove compartment of a car that was not mine, but would carry me to a place that was. I started the engine and let it idle just long enough to make a little warmth. Through the windshield, I could see the door hold its rectangle of light. People moved through it and became silhouettes and then became people again. The night was soft. It had done enough. My father appeared in the doorway for a moment. He did not step outside. He did not wave. He looked toward the parking lot and found my car and did not try to own the story of my leaving. He let the door close and let the room decide what it wanted to remember about him. Some endings are simply the absence of a certain kind of noise. I eased the car into gear and let the tires find the quiet. I do not need anyone to raise their voice for me to stand. My work has never been a microphone. It has been the decision to keep people safe and to tell the truth early. Tonight, the truth stood without me, and I am proud of that. If you have ever had to draw a new line with the people you love, tell me how you did it. I will read it. If these family stories help you hold your own ground, stay with me. Like this video, subscribe, and keep the bell on. There are more truths that do not need a stage to stand. There are more rooms that will learn a better kind of quiet. And when you are ready, we will walk into them together. I woke before my alarm. The family group chat looked freshly scrubbed. At the top sat Logan's pinned message. Safety brief before live fire, full context. No clever replies, no victory laps. Silence looked like people learning. Mom sent a photo. The worn envelope from last night rested on her kitchen table. When you have time, I will tell you why I kept it so long, she wrote. I typed 2 words. I know. Then I added a single heart. Enough for now. By afternoon, a guest clip of the salute landed on a local community page. No viral frenzy. A few thousand views and a thread of plain comments. Respect is earned, not given. My father's phone lit up for hours. He did not reply. 3 days later, Marcus and I stood on a white porch. The lock had a small dent the shape of someone fixing things alone. Mrs. Hale opened the door with a tired smile that had forgotten how to hide grief. She said Marcus's name first, then mine, and moved to the kitchen to make tea. We did not rush the heavy parts. She asked if I took sugar or honey. I said neither. She set the pot down. The porcelain clicked like a tiny bell. He texted me that night, she said. He wrote, I will be late, do not wait up. I waited anyway. Marcus nodded and stared at the edge of the table until the sentence ran out of breath. I said her son's name, the one we had only said inside our heads for years. She turned and brought out another envelope, older than mine. He wrote this after his first training week, she said, handing it to Marcus. Read it for me. Marcus read 2 lines. You have a commander who does not like to yell. She likes to be early and leave last. That is enough. His voice cracked once. Mrs. Hale placed her hand between his shoulders. I stayed still and let the room hold them. Before we left, she gave me a small square of fabric from her son's jacket, the edge worn near the buttonhole. Give it to him if you want, she said, or keep it in your wallet. Your choice. I slipped it into my pocket like a late answer arriving right on time. On the porch, Marcus spoke first. I want to come back next week, he said. Will you go with me? I said yes. We stood a little longer so the wind could carry away the smell of tea. Across town, my father sat in a glass conference room. Tyler stood across from him with a smile that did not know where to land. Dad placed his iPhone face down, then turned it over again like a man flipping a reason. You airdropped a clipped video at my son's wedding, Dad said. You thought I would enjoy that. I was trying to help you punch up the story, Tyler offered. Dad stared long enough for the room to find its own air. We do not punch up by making family smaller, he said. The sentence strangely sounded true. Tyler apologized with a handful of words about media strategy that broke on the table. Dad told him to take some time away. No theatrics, just a door closing without noise. A secretary tapped on the glass. A partner wished to discuss the remarks at the wedding. Dad said he would return the call. He sat alone and looked into a dark screen. For the first time, he understood how it feels when a microphone loses its power. He texted me. Dinner, 5 minutes. I met him on time and chose the window booth. Coffee and old grease made a smell that felt familiar. Avery, he said, as if the name could finish the sentence without help. I waited. I could make a donation to a veterans fund. In your name. He pushed his wallet an inch. It looked like sliding an offer down a bar. Good, I said, but not in my name. He frowned. I held his eyes. Do it because it is right. Not because someone will see it. He was quiet long enough to count. I kept the letter, he said at last. I pictured a day I would read it out loud to the relatives. I wanted the moment to pass through my voice. He smiled at himself, a small and tired thing. Maybe that is the sickness. I did not need anyone's voice that night, I said. I needed silence so the truth could stand on its own. He nodded. I am not good at apologies. He said to the spoon more than to me. I will practice. The server brought apple pie. He nudged the plate toward me without a speech. A small kind of change. When we left, he did not grip my shoulder the way he does when he wants to prove he is still the father. He only said, "Safe drive." I said, "Thank you." Enough for this night. Back home, I opened Mom's envelope and read those 3 sentences of the commendation, then folded it again. I wrote an after-action report in the notebook I keep for harder days. Do not add heat where heat already lives. Keep a straight line when others circle. Let the people who earned the truth bring it into the light. Rain carried the smell of cut grass through the window. I took the fabric Mrs. Hale gave me and slid it into a hidden pocket of my wallet beside an old photo of Logan with his arms around my neck on commissioning day. It is not a charm. It is a reminder. My phone lit up. Logan sent a photo of Claire laughing, 2 fingers raised in a peace sign. Under it, he wrote, "Mom says bring the envelope tomorrow. Dad will be there. No microphone." I set the phone down and felt lighter. Before sleep, I answered a message from a stranger who had commented under the video. I was made small at my own dinner table. She wrote, "How do you speak without blowing everything up?" I typed, "Set the boundary first." The voice comes after. "Choose one person to stand next to you. One is enough to begin." I turned off the light. Somewhere in the city, my father was practicing the right kind of quiet. Somewhere else, Marcus was asking Mrs. Hale if Sunday worked. In my mother's kitchen, the envelope sat in the open where it belonged. I thought about a ballroom that had learned a better silence. Then I slept, knowing some truths need no stage, only people willing to stand in the right place when those truths walk in. This time, we stood where we were supposed to. The next afternoon, sunlight pooled across my mother's kitchen table. The worn envelope sat in the center like a compass. Logan poured coffee. Claire lined up 4 cups as if order could keep everyone gentle. My father arrived on time and set his phone face down without being asked. He looked at the envelope, then at me. No audience, no microphone. Just a room that had learned a better kind of quiet. "Read it," Mom said. Her voice did not shake. I opened the commendation and chose a single sentence. "You kept your team safe and made the hard call on time." The words were plain. They did not need help. When I finished, the only sound was the clock deciding on its next second. My father cleared his throat. "I was late," he said. "I know." He slid a folded receipt across the table, a donation to a veterans fund. His name on it, not mine. He did not explain. I did not ask. "Thank you," I said. "The rest we can take a step at a time." Logan exhaled like a man who had been holding a door. Claire smiled the way new families smile when a piece clicks into place. Mom reached for my hand and left her palm there, not to shield, only to share the weight. We moved to the driveway. The air smelled like cut grass and the promise of rain that might not arrive. Logan loaded my bag into the trunk. Mom tucked the envelope into my clutch and patted it once, as if blessing the paper would keep the story whole. My father stopped beside the car and looked at the road instead of the camera that was not there. "Safe drive," he said. "You too," I answered. It was not forgiveness and it was not a fight. It was a start. On the highway, the city slid into the rear view and turned into light. My wallet held the small square of fabric from Mrs. Hale beside an old photo of Logan with his arms around my neck. My phone buzzed once. A message from Marcus. "Sunday at 2, I typed back. "I will be early." The sky opened into a steady blue that did not ask for proof. I do not need anyone to raise their voice for me to stand. My work has never been a stage. It is the road home, the line I keep straight. The people who know why we wait and when we move. If you have ever had to draw a new line with the people you love, I hope this helped you find your next step. When you are ready, we will walk into the next room together and let the truth stand on its own.